Welcome to another Luck Scout bedtime story. The Blessing of the Forgotten. In a small village nestled between the mountains and the sea, there lived an old man named Barak. Barak had lived in the village for as long as anyone could remember. He was bent with age, his clothes worn and tattered, and his face wrinkled from many years of hardship. He had no family, no wealth, and his appearance was rough, so the villagers often turned their backs on him. They whispered behind his back, calling him a burden and assuming he had nothing to offer. Barak lived in a tiny hut on the outskirts of the village. And while the villagers shunned him, they had no idea of the life he lived in quiet devotion. Each night, as the village lay sleeping, Barak would kneel and pray. He prayed not for himself, but for the health, safety, and prosperity of the villagers who disrespected him. He prayed that their crops would grow, that their children would be safe, and that their homes would be protected from storms. Barak believed that kindness and forgiveness were more powerful than bitterness, and so he continued to pray for the very people who showed him no kindness. But as the years went by, the villagers grew more impatient with the old man's presence. They saw him as a useless figure who only took up space, someone who contributed nothing to their community. And so one day a decision was made, a decision that would change the village in ways they could not have foreseen. On a fateful morning, the village leaders gathered together and decided that Barak should be exiled. They believed that his presence brought nothing but a shadow over their lives, and if he were gone, perhaps their village would flourish even more. With little thought for his feelings, they approached Barak, who sat quietly in front of his small hut. Without compassion or explanation, they told him he had to leave. They would take him far away from the village and leave him there, and he was not to return. Barak, though heartbroken, did not protest. He'd always known that the villagers looked down on him, but he had hoped that in their hearts they might one day understand the value of kindness. Nevertheless, he accepted their decision with grace, packing his few belongings and following the men out of the village. They left him in a desolate place, far from the village, and returned to their homes, believing they had done something good for their community. That night, Barak knelt by the side of a cold, lonely path and prayed once again. Despite what had happened, he still wished the village well. He prayed for their safety, for their crops, and for their peace. But the village would soon learn the cost of their decision. Not long after Barak was cast out, strange things began to happen in the village. A great storm rolled in from the sea, fiercer than any they had ever seen. The wind howled through the streets, tearing roofs from houses and flattening fields. The villagers huddled inside their homes, terrified, as the storm raged through the night. The next day, as they surveyed the damage, they assumed it was a fluke. But soon another disaster struck, a powerful earthquake that shook the very foundations of the village. The ground cracked, walls crumbled, and the villagers were left scrambling to rebuild. And before they could recover, a flood swept through, washing away what little remained of their homes and crops. Day after day, disaster followed disaster, and the once peaceful village was now in ruins. The people were filled with despair, wondering why such misfortune had suddenly fallen upon them. Life, which had once been prosperous and safe, was now filled with hardship and fear. One evening, as the villagers gathered to discuss what could be done, one of them finally spoke up. "Why is this happening to us? We never had such terrible luck before." Another villager, an elder who had watched all of this unfold, replied thoughtfully, "These disasters began after we sent Barak away. Perhaps it was not he who brought misfortune to our village. Perhaps in his quiet presence he was the one protecting us all along." The villagers fell silent, remembering the old man they had treated so poorly. They had judged him based on his appearance, his poverty, and his age. They had never once considered that perhaps Barak was more valuable than they had ever realized. The next morning, filled with regret and desperation, the villagers set out to find Barak. They searched through the hills and valleys, following the path they had taken when they exiled him. It wasn't long before they found him sitting quietly by the side of the road, just as they had left him. Barak looked up at them, his face filled with kindness and understanding. The villagers, overcome with guilt, knelt before him. "Barak," they said, "we have wronged you. We believed you were a burden to our village, but now we see that you were our blessing. Since we cast you out, our lives have been filled with disaster. Please forgive us. We ask that you return to the village and bring peace back to our lives." Barak listened quietly, and after a moment he spoke. "I hold no ill will toward any of you. Even when you cast me out, I continued to pray for your safety and well-being. It is not for me to judge you, but remember this: just because someone looks poor, weak, or unimportant does not mean that they are without value. Every person has a role to play in this world, and sometimes the most unnoticed among us are the ones who bring the greatest blessings." With those words, Barak rose to his feet. The villagers, humbled and grateful, helped him gather his belongings, and together they walked back to the village. When Barak returned to the village, something remarkable happened. The storms ceased, the earthquakes stopped, and the floods receded. The village was calm once again, and slowly life returned to normal. The people of the village, having learned the importance of humility and respect, began to rebuild their homes with a newfound sense of gratitude. Barak was no longer treated as an outcast. Instead, the villagers honored him, not because of his wealth or power, but because they had come to understand the strength of his heart and the kindness of his spirit. They realized that it was not his appearance that mattered, but the love and care he had always shown for them, even when they did not deserve it. The village prospered once more, and Barak lived out the rest of his days in peace, respected and cherished by all. And from that day forward, the villagers knew that they should never judge someone by their outward appearance. They had learned that the heart of a person is where true value lies, and that even the most overlooked among us can bring blessings beyond measure. As you lie in your bed tonight, remember the story of Barak and the village. In life, never judge someone by how they appear or what little they seem to have. Everyone has a role, and sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and know that kindness and understanding are always rewarded, and with them peace will follow.